Hello, everyone. My name is Wendy Tullo. I am here from Oracle Communications, and I'm Product Marketing Director at Oracle Communications. I'm thrilled to be here today with Irwin Lazar, who is President and Principal Analyst at Metrigy. Hi, Irwin.
Hi, Wendy. How are you?
Great. Thank you again for joining us. Before we start talking, why don't you talk a little bit about Metrigy and how you are helping the industry?
Sure. So Metrigy launched in January of this year, so we're a little over 6 months old now. And we spun out of a company called Metrigy Research. It's been around since 2002. And really what we're focusing on at Metrigy is going out to end users, conducting primary research about what technologies they're adopting and why, and trying to distill out of that, what are the characteristics of successful companies. So we look at predominantly the collaboration, communications, and customer engagement markets. And we try and figure out what are companies doing that differently that are realizing measurable benefits, including revenue gain, productivity improvements, and cost savings versus those that may not be realizing such benefits.
Great. Well, congratulations. And great. So quite a year for everyone on the planet. And one of the things that really stood out for employees is how it's changed the enterprise UC space. And it also created a lot of challenges for those individuals who manage UC applications. So in addition, it also accelerated the move to UC as a service. So I know that Metrigy recently published a report on the hybrid workplace. So can you tell us a little bit about what you found and what was really interesting in your opinion?
Yeah, definitely. So we published a study earlier this year about 476 companies based in Western Europe, North America, Southeast Asia, and Australia. And we found that one of the key, hypotheses that we had going in is that there would be an acceleration. I've heard the line that says, you've seen 2 years of digital transformation in a handful of months, and we validated that. We found obviously more than 80% of employees now are working from home. Pretty much anyone who can work from home has shifted to home. And that caused people to take a big look at cloud and accelerate their plans to go to cloud. So we found about 60% of participants who said that the pandemic had increased or accelerated their plans to take advantage of things like cloud voice and cloud video. And we found that specifically looking at telephony, there has been a big jump in the percentage of companies that are now using UCaaS as their primary as their primary calling platform. So that's up to 48%. It's bigger. It's a bigger segment than any other segment. We also look at on-premises. We look at hosted solutions. So we have found that UCaaS, which in our research 2-3 years ago was largely smaller companies, has now not gradually but quickly shifted into larger companies as well, global multinationals that are now moving to UCaaS as fast as they can.
Yes, UCaaS made quite a show of the last 15 months or so. So part of what's really interesting to me and my colleagues is how much security and performance comes into play here. Can you talk a little bit about those two components you found through your research?
Yeah. So when we asked participants what were the biggest challenges they were facing in supporting their home workers, those are the two that rose to the top. Specifically, network performance was the biggest factor because, again, I come out of an IT background, and we always sort of treated people who work from home as their best effort. We're not going to go and try and manage the home network. Well, that's changed now that the home network is the new office network. So we're in an environment where we might be at the mercy of whatever internet services are out there. We have employees who are fighting for network contention with spouses, with children who are gaming or students, and so on. So we want to make sure that we can address some of those issues and provide proactive guidance to people to help them optimize those home networking environments. And then the second issue has been security. So as you think about access to cloud-based applications, sometimes that goes through a firewall, which creates some performance concerns. Sometimes it goes directly out of the internet connection, which might create some new security controls and attack vectors and so on, as well as people going out and getting new apps and bringing them in without asking for permission first. So when the apps aren't working, when they're not secure, when the network's not working, that leads to a lot of frustration and challenges to support that remote workforce.
And how it impacts revenue also, right? The sort of frustration on the employee side.
Definitely. I mean, one of the other factors we found as we dug into the challenges of supporting remote workers is keeping them engaged and happy and feeling like they're productive. And if network issues are in the way and security issues are in the way, they're likely going to look maybe elsewhere, and that's going to negatively impact revenue. It might negatively increase costs. So it creates a lot of frustration, a lot of additional challenges.
Sure. Something else that was really relevant in the report was the focus on bring your own carrier, BYOC, which is not new, but seems to be gaining a lot of attention lately. Why is that now, and how does it play into work from home?
Yeah, so BYOC allows companies to take their existing PSTN access infrastructure, their SIP services, their session border controllers, and port that over to a cloud-based control plane versus using their on-premise call control servers. So we've found as UCaaS has jumped into the larger end of the market, that BYOC has become a lot more critical, especially in the Microsoft environment. We found about 70% of companies that are using Microsoft Teams phone system are using direct routing, as Microsoft calls it, or BYOC. And so it allows, if I'm thinking as an enterprise communications architect, I can continue to control my phone numbers. I can continue to control my dialing plans. I probably have contracts in place I can't get out of right away for PSTN access services. I might have contracts with different parts of the world to save some money. And I also may have additional communication platforms, maybe like a contact center platform, for example, that I want to control call routing to. So I don't want to port that PSTN access specifically over to the cloud provider, but I want to take advantage of their apps, take advantage of their control, and allow me to continue to use my PSTN connectivity.
And what are some of the challenges that by going to a BYOC model would come about?
Yeah, I think it's some of what we talked about earlier now applied to a different part of the communication infrastructure, which is security and performance. So if you think about for remote workers who are connecting across a VPN, they would go across a VPN. That call would be controlled by a server sitting within the enterprise data center, and then maybe routed out to the PSTN through an enterprise control point. Now that call, if you're still using that VPN model, goes into the enterprise network, out the enterprise network to the cloud provider, and then back in to have the media set up between your endpoint, your phone, soft client, whatever, out to the PSTN. So you're adding potentially additional latency, additional delay, and additional areas for performance issues. So you want to make sure that you can optimize that home worker so that when they do make a call, they can send that call control out over their local internet connection, hopefully reliably and with enough performance that becomes a high quality phone call. Secondly, it becomes that security issue that we talked about earlier. Once you've got your remote devices sitting in home networks that are now potentially open to the internet, they could become an attack vector for malware attacks, for phishing attacks, all the different, some of the ones we've seen in the news over the last couple of months. And so you want to make sure that you're thinking more broadly than just protecting that PSTN connectivity point from your SBC out to your SIP provider, but you're also thinking about protecting the applications for those home workers as well.
And we've talked about having a proactive approach before. Is that the advice you would give a company with BYOC? What would you say? This is what you would do to ensure success.
Yeah, I think we'll use that word proactive quite a bit on this talk. It really is the fundamental way that you avoid, having security issues that cause significant downtime, that cause disruptions to your network and ultimately costs. Unfortunately, only about 40% of our participants in our study that I mentioned earlier have a security plan in place today that covers their collaboration applications. In many cases, they're still thinking about just protecting that SIP interconnection point, and they haven't expanded it out to support the remote workers. We did find it when we looked at the success group, those who had the highest ROI for their collaboration investments in terms of cost savings, revenue gain, productivity improvement, that nearly 66% of those companies, the success group, have a proactive security strategy versus less than 30 of the non-success group. And that strategy looks at ensuring that not only are our voice connections secure, but also that we're securing those home worker points. We're securing our applications. We're looking at a broader set of collaborative applications, not just calling, but video and meetings and even ideation tools and other apps that we might be using out there. So if you want to be successful, again, be proactive and think broad and ensure that your security strategy covers those home workers.
I want to, because you said a few things that piqued our interest, me and my colleagues, was that security, of course, with SBCs is something that we like to talk about a lot. Is at Oracle, we have a security first mindset, which dates back to the 1970s with the first database to today with network security, right? So, and security first mindset is something that we encourage all of our customers and partners to take on that mindset also. How do you see other companies dealing with so many security challenges?
Yeah, can I say proactive again? So that is the word of the day, I think. So there's a couple of things. First, as we talked about, having a plan. You have to have a plan, or you really don't know what you're trying to accomplish. It's a process of education. Now, one of the other factors we saw in our security research is that there's often a disconnect between a CISO, a CISO group, and a collaboration team. They may not truly understand the needs of each other and what some of the risks are, especially as the collaboration application landscape has exploded. And I think, putting in a plan, if the recommendations we would give, implement the proactive security architecture and management platform, make sure that you have a means of enforcing proactive policy across all the different applications you have today, making sure you have a mitigation plan in case there is an attack, whether that's from a remote worker or across a SIP trunk or some other means of that somebody got into your network. Take advantage of what you've got today. If you've got SBCs and SIP trunks, those are usually going to be effective policy access points with the right software and management control. So use those to enforce policy and protect against SIP-based registration, toll fraud types of attack. Third, ensure the home network users are secure. So that might require an agent on a home machine that would allow you to control what applications they're able to access, make sure that they're up to date on antivirus, that you're monitoring traffic might be coming back in for potential phishing attacks. And then third, make sure that make sure that your network is evolving to support the way that calling is changing, especially as we think about voice. We've gone from an environment now where people are largely at home. Traffic patterns have changed. As we think about connecting via BYOC to a SIP provider or via a network connection to a cloud provider, we want to ensure that connection is resilient, reliable, that we know the performance of it, taking advantage of things like SD-WAN. We do see deployment of SD-WAN as a correlating factor with successful UCaaS deployments. So, kind of keeping up with how that network traffic will evolve, especially as we go forward and people begin to potentially come back to the office for some period of time.
So that is sage advice, Irwin. Thank you. And on that note, all things being equal, security, performance, reliability, what do you think? Is work from home model here to stay for the long haul?
Yeah, I don't think we're ever going back to the way things were before, or at least not anytime soon. I think people have come to largely enjoy the flexibility of working from home. We've seen productivity increase with many companies. We have. I was just talking to one of our clients this morning, a large enterprise, who was telling me that they were looking at an 80-20 rule where people would spend about 80% of their time at home, 20% back in the office. Every time I've talked to any of our clients who have said they want to their company has thought about getting more aggressive in bringing people back, they've been hit with a backlash. So I think as you think about the plan going forward and addressing those core areas that you mentioned, security, BYOC, being able to support both home and remote workers, home and in-office workers, performance management, and so on. You need to plan on an environment that will continue to largely be remote work going forward, but will also provide for hybrid support for the employees who do come back or who come back just part-time, maybe once a week or once a month or something along those lines.
So, Irwin, we don't have a lot of time, but we'd like to always leave the audience with just a few key takeaways. So, of course, the number one is have a proactive approach, especially when it comes to security. One of those things means leveraging an SBC. And in terms of BYOC, remote working requires addressing performance and security. And enterprises need to address resiliency and security and performance for both in-home workers and also workers in the office. What else is a key takeaway?
Yeah, I think flexibility. Flexibility to support change. That we talked about the change in where people are working, different applications that are rapidly entering the workplace. Things like team collaboration, ideation applications are now becoming part of that communications environment. Mentioned contact center as well. So I think flexibility will continue to be key going forward, and also understanding the threat risks and how they continue to evolve. We've seen things like nation state attacks have become a bigger challenge over the last couple of months, if not years. So you have to, again, I'm going to if I have to close with one word, it would be proactive. I think, you need a strategy, you need a plan in place to monitor and measure. You need to ensure network availability, and you need to ensure security.
Right. The more technology advances, so do the cyber threats, no doubt. So, Irwin, this wraps up our talk. Thank you very much. I would encourage everyone to download the report. It's called Achieving BYOC and Hybrid UC Success. There is also a webinar with my coworker, Doug Tate, who's Product Marketing Director at Oracle, and also Robin Garris from Metrigy. So thank you again for joining us, everyone. Be well and be safe. Thank you.
Thank you.